Righteous is one of those words that jars us when heard outside of a religious context. But since the word refers to being declared right or free of guilt, it is occasionally used in a TV show or movie by someone falsely accused of a crime, seeking to be found and openly declared innocent or righteous. While it has a religious connection, the word in and of itself is not a religious word. So we shouldn't be surprised to hear it used in other settings. However, we should be jarred to our very soul when we hear it used to describe religious actions and beliefs that are contrary to the will of God. And it needs to be even more jarring if we find ourselves using it to describe our own religious activities that are not God approved. We don't want to wait for an Amos to come declare how God hates and rejects our religious activities because they, and we, are not righteous. Amos 5:21 through 27. Today's Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible and An American Missionary reaches back to October 1980 from Plain Talk Magazine for some thoughts on how to shift our attitude, and perhaps that of others, to actually seek God's righteousness instead of our own self-declared righteousness. Righteousness of God by Kevin O'Banion. Righteousness not only involves a right or just standing before God, but also refers to whatever has been approved by God to be acknowledged and obeyed by man, vine. Man is righteous only to the extent that he is striving to conform to the will of God. The scribes and Pharisees in Romans 10:3 were neither just nor justified in God's sight because being ignorant of God's righteousness and seeking to establish their own, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of God. It would be profitable to ask ourselves if we are truly right-wise, knowledgeable of God's standard of what is right or just. It may be that we seek to measure our righteousness by our own standard, as did the scribes and Pharisees. For example, many of them conceived of a righteousness attained through external works. The self-righteous Pharisee of Luke 18 exemplifies this false notion. Fasting twice a week and giving tithes of all he got no more justified him than our attending services 3 times a week and partaking of the Lord's Supper would justify us. If we simply go through the motions, we forget the very essence of obedience, faith in God. Yet the fact that we are justified by faith does not negate the importance of expressing that faith in acts of obedience. Unless our obedience, external works, is accompanied and produced by true heart submission, it will not be acceptable to God. 1 Samuel 15:22, Amos 5:21 through 24. We may also deceive ourselves by assuming righteousness is determined by self-approval or by comparing self with others. The Judaizing teachers knew of only one standard of measurement and comparison great and exalted enough to apply to themselves, and that was themselves. Linsky on 2 Corinthians 10, verse 12. We dare not measure ourselves by ourselves, for, as Proverbs 21:2 states, every way of man is right in his own eyes. Equally deceiving is the reasoning that we are righteous because we are not as the rest of men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, Luke 18, verse 11. Many will be surprised in judgment when they learn that God's righteousness is determined by comparing each man's obedience or lack of obedience to God's word. John 12:48. Finally, we may deem ourselves righteous because we are affiliated with a certain group or party. As the scribes and Pharisees based their righteousness on being a descendant of Abraham, many today feel justified because they are of a certain religious body. Their group's conclusions become the equivalent of truth, and a fatal switch has been made from God's standard to man's standard. We must remember that the church, those righteous in God's eyes, is composed of individuals who have responded to God's will. We should note that these righteous individuals will be drawn together, but by something deeper than the name on the building or party acceptance. Righteousness involves more than external works, self-approval, or church affiliation. It is attainable only as man submits his will to God's will in all things. Great thoughts, Kevin. and an excellent warning to all of us today as well. Any standard of being right or innocent, free of guilt, that does not start and end with God is, well, not right. We must not rely on false standards of righteousness if we don't want to be jarred by the echo of Amos when God rejects us as unrighteous on Judgment Day. Thank you for those excellent thoughts, Kevin, and thank you for watching this Throwback Thursday edition of Morning Minutes in the Bible on An American Missionary. Until next time, this is James from McClenny, hoping you have a great day.